I will call to order the Wednesday, May 8th regular meeting of the Charter Revision Commission. Ask everybody to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, I want to thank the members and public for allowing us to reschedule last week's meeting. Both Melanie and I had conflicts come up in short order, and we appreciate you guys being accommodating. Our first agenda item is the approval of the minutes from our April 3rd meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Any discussion, anything need to be amended, changed? Hearing none, I'll move the motion for approval. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Correspondence?
There's no correspondence.
What's that?
I don't have any
Nothing? Okay.
correspondence.
All right, so we will open the floor to public input. This is probably our best attended meeting.
It's nice to see.
Yeah. So, just a reminder
So far.
be efficient in your words and respect the time of other folks. Absolutely, Mr. Duff.
Michael Duff, 33 Long Meadow Lane. This has to do with, I believe it's 11-11 meetings. I'd like to point out that the members of all commissions and elected positions are definitely responsible people, and they certainly have a good sense to know where and when to have a meeting. Also, each year, all boards and commissions must report to the town clerk, letting the town clerk and the public know when the next year's meetings are going to be. If any of those meetings are inappropriate, of course, the community has time to respond to that. I'd like to point out that this particular chapter in our, or section in our town charter has been abused since conception. As far as I know, Housing Authority has never met in Municipal Center, nor has the Library Board, and at times the Building and Site Committee have not. It is a section that is simply not enforced. The Police Commission, though, has been inconvenienced many times by noise in the hallways, intrusions during executive session, interruptions during interviews, and worst of all, having our meetings without the reference material that we must keep at the police station. I could go on quite a bit on that error. I'm going to make a recommendation concerning 11-11. Do not try to reword it. It was ill-conceived and poorly constructed. Simply delete it and get rid of the problem and let the boards and commissions do their responsible thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Cynthia McCorkindale, 19 Elgin Avenue. So, I was very present at the last charter revision. So what I want to say has to do with that and some things that I have concerns about. I was summarily admonished by the first selectman just 5 minutes ago on Facebook because I was hysteria mongering. But I assure you I'm not doing that. I'm trying to make people very aware what the charter revision is, and I just want to encourage you to take into consideration the voice of the people and how we've enjoyed that for many years with the town meeting form of government. And also, the last time there were changes proposed for a 5-person board for 4-year terms that were bundled together. I might be getting ahead of the game here, but I just want to, prophylactically just say a couple of things that I think we need to be concerned about. The town meeting form of government is a very strong sentiment here in town. And the other thing is, as far as I'm thinking that there's going to be a move towards trying to combine the budgets again. And again, maybe there's not, but I'm just saying, I just think we need to be aware of things that may actually affect the voice of the people, and that's all my concern is. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Anthony Rubino, 43 Redwood Drive, Bethel. I'll speak a little bit more as Mike Duff did. regarding the police commission. One person, one resident in this town made a complaint. They didn't like where the police commission was having their meetings. Make a place, and they changed it. They changed the charter, which made up the police commission meet upstairs in the corner of this town hall, which is wrong. We run a meeting, we don't have any information in front of us if we need to go get it. We can't postpone a meeting if we're working on something that's very strong right then. We have to hold it off for another month to finish the meeting. What this does, it was wrong. This police commission needs to be in the police department. We need to see the officers. There are so many officers now that were hired in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't even remember half of them that are on the force now. I was on a call one night, and the gentleman was smiling at me, and I said, "Excuse me," I said, I don't remember your name. He said, "It's me, Talaski." I said, "Oh yeah, Talaski, how are you?" We never see the officers that we hire. You have a brand new facility up there. Those meetings should be at the police station or the police commission meeting, please. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Tia Murphy, 37 Linda Lane, Bethel. I am the chair of the Bethel Library Board. Just as a regarding meeting, my understanding was that we could meet here if there was space, or we could meet in the library. And one of the issues that we've run into a number of times when we've tried to meet here is that other meetings were at the same time, and we are, by our bylaws, we have to meet on certain days of the week, and so do other commissions. So as a result, we scheduled, and a number of times we got bumped. So we have been holding our meetings, which we post, and anyone is more than welcome to come over to the library. It's always at a time when the library is also open to the public, unless there is a unique situation, and then we meet in the foyer so that people can see if if they want to come in and join the meeting, we will let them in and do that. And if we've ever run over when the past closing time, extremely rare, but has happened, we have adjourned the meeting or suspended the meeting from the meeting rooms upstairs and gone downstairs into the foyer. So I was under the impression that, from my reading of the charter, that we were allowed to do that. Perhaps I had something that was a revision or had not been accepted, but it really, that's the issue that we run into. And so our meeting space is also open for anyone to have meetings there as well, and we have a system for being able to do that. So if that is not part of the charter now that we are allowed to do that, we were under the impression that we were, it would be great to be able to do that, just like the police commissioner. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to have your meeting in the facility, so that a lot of times our board members, if there is a specific issue about something like we're looking at the team space and we want to talk about how we're reconstructing or reallocating space or making a change, we can physically go there and see what it looks like, which is very, very helpful, rather than having to move across the street or whatever. So I just wanted to make that point. Again, we were under the impression that that was part of what we were allowed to do. And so that's why we do that, but we always publicly state where we are having the meetings, and that has been ever since the new construction was completed on the library.
Thank you. Yes.
Kitty Grant, 23 Quaker Ridge Road. I did not come prepared to speak, but after listening to what I'm hearing, I would like to. I've been on planning and zoning for quite a few years, and having a meeting and knowing what goes on during our meetings, not being able to have the materials available that are necessary when you're at a meeting, to me, it boggles my mind how you could make the police commission meet in this building when all of their materials are in that building, or even the library. The library should meet in the library. I don't know why this rule was made up, but I definitely think it should be changed. And the police commission should meet in the police station, and the library should be in the library, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Pat Riss, 10 Shelter Rock Road, Chairman of Planning and Zoning. I was looking at C11-11 meetings, and there was something that just stood out, and if I could, I'm just gonna read the wording. In addition, this provision, as it is currently written, prohibits the Planning and Zoning and Inland Wetlands Commissions from meeting in the field to perform site walks. I've been on Planning and Zoning 18 years. We have been doing site walks for 18 years, and they're treated as a meeting. They're opened and they're closed. And I wanted to talk about, change the word newspapers to publications to allow greater flexibility in publication of legal notices. Now, we talked about this years ago in Planning and Zoning, because the cost to run our legal notices in the Danbury News Times is actually just extraordinarily expensive. But we were told over the years, and I believe it came from the town attorney, that we can't do that. So now that you want to change the wording, does that mean legal notices can now go into the penny saver? Or else, also we have the Community Gazette here. Does that mean he can now post legal notices in the Community Gazette? I think people would look to those things for information.
I mean, that's been part of the conversation, is to make the verbiage flexible, seeing that it's 5 years between this. Communication isn't moving towards printed newspapers. Paywalls are going up every day. How do we make it accessible? And whether it's other printed media or digital media, we don't want the town to be prohibited from utilizing that resource and having to pay, a fee because we didn't set up the charter appropriately to put the town in the best situation. So. Any other public comment?
I'm Billy Michael, 27.5 Leawood Avenue. Congratulations. It's a double-edged sword. You can alter the soul of the town. And it's scary because this is our Constitution. This is the soul of Bethel, is our charter. And those of you that have been around here a long time, and even new arrivals, no, I don't know if the new arrivals have been around, but when Dickie Kolwitz sat on the Charter Revision Commission in 1988, 89, when monumental changes occurred in our town charter, and it was part of a populist movement that went through the state of Connecticut in the 80s. No one talks about it anymore. But the automatic referendum was part of a statewide move. In 1986, there were only 2 towns that had automatic referenda, Weston and Granby, and one was doing away with it. And then, all of a sudden, this idea took hold that we should maximize the amount of people voting on tax increases and spending. The town meeting at that time was drawing about 2% of the people, and a bad referendum would still draw 15%. Yesterday, I believe it was 19%. We had 24% a month earlier. So this idea of maximizing the participation in a referendum was a populist, citizen-driven event, statewide. And towns with town meeting form of government were able to enact it. Towns that moved to mayor, council, or city manager, the professionalized methodologies of running bigger cities, didn't have a prayer for this. And I think when we look at the soul of our town, there has been a steady move, currents of thought. The currents of thought are not toward retaining the town meeting form of government. People find it annoying, the votes, the budget, people speaking at town meeting, people that have opposing views, they don't like, there's all that human element that some people don't like, and they want a professional, clean. It's got to be clean and done, and you pay people to do it, and you don't participate. And look, everybody in this room knows how few people participate in the actual governance of our town, but it's open to all, and that's the beauty of the town meeting form of government. We are all citizen legislators, and when you look at a chart of the flow chart of power, it's the people. The people in Bethel are the first, and then you go through your elected officials and your various boards and commissions. So the whole point of my my little input is I would hope that you don't alter the political soul of the town, because the town meeting, a form of government, allowed us to thwart the sale of our water supply. That was the town meeting form of government, and all of the mechanisms that allow citizens, just little nobodies, unelected people, to stand up against bureaucracies. And this, just think of how wonderful this is. This went to everybody's house. This warning that went to probably about 8,000 houses is not the result of a ordinance or something from the town officials, the elected officials. This came from up from the ground. The people of the town did this. And so town meeting form of government allows so much ingenuity to stem from the people that the elected officials are supposed to serve. This was a marvelous thing. This would not have happened in a city manager form of government or anything that was reliant on the management of the town. This came from the people of the town. The town meeting form of government, when you take just those three things, the Charter Revision Commission of 1989, completely citizen-driven. It started with a debate on Rhoda Down's WLAD radio show with Cliff Virgin, and he allowed a 34-year-old hippie to go on with him. Now, that is a town meeting, that defines what a town is. Cliff let me go on the radio with him, WLAD, in debate, should annual town budgets require machine vote approval? But my point is, the town meeting affords so much for the least of us in order to enact change and to have an impact on things. So I would hope that there's going to be a lot of siren songs because it looks good. They all look good. The modernizing, the modernization, all of that stuff. But the town meeting form of government, the genius of our founders, and someday you ought to look at the centennial. This actually happened in 1955. We had the biggest parade in town in 1964. You remember the parade?
1955.
Well, yeah, but the parade, the flood of 55 occurred, so you couldn't have the parade for 5 years. So the parade ended up in 1961. 61 was the parade.
We had a
but
parade in 55.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the big one.
I was there.
I know. Anyway, take a look. If you want to see people power, we celebrated the centennial of Bethel. It was 1 month long of events, people-driven. I hate to lose that. And the town meeting form of government embraces that more than any other political construction known to man. Thank you so much for your time.
Any other public comments? No? All right, we'll move to the next agenda item. Board of Finance Chairman, Mr. Manfreda, wanted to address the commission.
Thank you for letting me address you tonight. Somewhat echoing the prior speaker's comments, what you do is very important. I don't think of it so much as managing souls, but I do think of it as it's the contract between the town and its citizens. So what you all are doing is kind of setting the rules, setting the conduct, the code of conduct. It is extremely important, so thank you for that. We all know sitting on boards takes a lot of time, commissions a lot of time. Being on board myself, I kind of understand that. Thank you very much for your contributions to the town, so thank you. I have two very quick comments. My first is addressing section C10-2 cap D. That is the provision which divides the budget into a Board of Ed budget and a town operating budget. That came into effect, I guess it was about 2007, so just about 12 years ago, a little short. Back then, I was kind of on record as saying that I think that provision was going to be a little bit divisive to the town, and they have people kind of rooting for one side of the budget and not the other. I think over the years, we've seen a little bit of that, but again, a credit to the quality of the folks in Bethel, we haven't seen a lot. But I do think that that divisiveness can be eliminated by dropping the two budgets and having a single budget. Almost as importantly, and it does echo Mr. Michael's comment and some question I'm going to bring up later or soon, the second referendum tends to have even fewer people attending than the first referendum. So if a budget does fail, we end up with even fewer people addressing that second budget. So to me, it seemed like it would be best to have as most participation as we can on the entire budget through one referendum. That would be a combined town operating and Board of Ed budget. So I just put that out there as a consideration, something to think about. Thank you. My next comment just has to do with the process of the budget. Sections C10-2 Cap E, C6-3 Cap A, and section C6-3 Cap B. That's the public hearing, the town meeting, and the budget referendum. Again, echoing Mr. Michael's comments, I think we're all frustrated by the numbers that participate in those meetings. Again, the contract nature of this document that you all are working on, I'm just curious as to whether or not we can build something into that document that helps with notice and awareness of the process. Again, I don't know what the answer is, but this being the contract for how people operate, if there's some way that you all who are thinking about this really more than anybody else can think about how we can use those sections in a way to draw greater participation in the process. And those are my only comments, and I'll just end again with saying thank you. I know this is not an easy job.
Thank you, Chairman Nefreda. Now we'll invite up Ms. Beth Cavagna, our town planner.
There was just a few things that I wanted to talk about. First, a lot of the people in this room are people that were on charter revision commissions with me. I was on 4. I think I started a 5th, but I left to come to work for the town at that point. But anyways, dealing with planning and zoning, as far as the publication, I've been a supporter of that for years, and I think it's important to discuss it with town council, or at least our present town council, to ensure that if we make that change, we're accomplishing what we want to do, which is publish in the penny saver at least a quarter of the price of what it's costing us now to do our publications. I think something like the penny saver, which reaches 7,000, 8,000 households in the town of Bethel, serves the people of Bethel much better than the News Times. I don't know, very few of us that even read the legal notices in the News Times. Also, along the same lines, dealing with the department, in your definition of a public works director, I think it's important to include drainage. You're talking about roads and fleet maintenance and things of that nature. I think it's very important to expound on his definition and his role in town, and that's again just seeing how the day-to-day is operated from within now. In regards to state statutes dealing with town employees serving on the land use commissions, I don't know if your council is familiar with that. I believe that there was a change in the statutes over the last year or two that makes some kind of an allowance for that to occur. It's not something I'm looking for a change for because, again, just reviewing different positions that are in town hall, the assessor's office, the tax collector's office, that may have some type of communication or influence, could possibly have influence on whether development takes place or doesn't take place. I like the way it works now where town employees cannot be on land use commissions. I think it works well. Now I'm going to talk just a little bit about the charter things, and it's interesting how the world changes in 20 years. 1989? How many years ago was that, Bill? It was about 20 years ago. 30 years ago. 30 years ago. Okay. And in my time in serving on the Charter Revision Commission, I always said from day one, it's to try to keep our town meeting form of government and take it as far as we can go with it to make it more accessible to the general public. In conversations with even the present First Selectman, I've always said to him, when you're ready to change the form of government, give me a call. I feel the last 2 Charter Revision Commissions, all you're doing is tweaking and fixing. If you choose to stay with the present form of government, I ask for you to look at 2 things that were instituted by Charter Revision Commissions where I was a member of. The first one being, I do agree with Mr. Manfreda in regards to the budget. I think Billy would attest to the fact that when we changed the charter and we instituted the referendum, I had severe reservations with that. I said we were one town, one budget. I think at the time when the change was made, It was done in regards to the Board of Education, splitting the budget, because the Board of Education budget was always the higher budget, and you could never touch it, you could never do anything with it. So you split the budget. So for 10 years after we made that change, the Board of Ed, I feel, and again, this is personal opinion, I feel the Board of Education failed, because they were not getting the funding necessary to accomplish what needed to be accomplished. It took them years to get to the level where they are now. Well, now I've seen a change in the pendulum, where I see the town of Bethel, the Bethel side of the budget is failing. And I see that we're gonna have problems going into the future. And I can only relate it to my little world. We've just built a police station, which is over, and again, I'm just using numbers, 20,000 square feet. We have 2 school additions that are coming on board. They're probably 40, 50,000 square feet. You have an empty police station that you're taking care of now. You have an addition that you put on the high school. And I think you can see the results of doing that with poor planning. We are now replacing a boiler for over $1 million because it was 30, 40 years old, and common sense tells you when you're putting an addition on a building, you want to look at the other aspects that are involved. I'm talking about maintenance. So we're doing all these good things in town. We're doing it by the people telling us that we need to do it, but we're not maintaining what we have. We're not planning for the future maintenance of those things. You don't see increase in personnel. People don't want to hear increase in personnel. But then again, you're putting on 100,000 square feet of additional space that's going to be needed to be maintained and taken care of by professionals. There's an imbalance there, and I'm just using that as an example. Another example would be roads. In the 80s and 90s, we did have a lot of subdivisions. We had a lot of public roads that were created. In that time period, again, did we ever increase the use of personnel for snow plowing, maintenance, drainage, sewer, water, and things of that nature? No. So I think the pendulum has swung the other way. It's obvious the educational part of the budget has made tremendous strides over the last 10, 15 years. And that goes back to the point I'm trying to make to you, that if you choose to maintain the town meeting form of government, it's one line, because you have to keep it balanced. Because all we've been doing is creating imbalances. And that's just my observations from making that change and allowing for a referendum to take place for the budget. In regards to that also, I do feel, and I giggle every time I go in to vote, when we had a lot of arguments again, and I don't know if it was the '89 charter, or what charter it was that I was on.
89.
Was it the questions?
89.
Did we put the non-binding questions on
89.
in '89? Okay, the non-binding questions. It's always and it's always been a discussion during charter revisions, the non-binding questions. I do not feel they serve a purpose. When you're given the opportunity, you're going in to vote, and you're looking at a budget, who is going, and very few people are going to say, it's too low. I, as a voter, I would go in the booth, and I mean, who wants to pay more taxes? No one wants to pay more taxes. And we, in other charter revisions, we had conversations on too high, too low, just right. I'm saying we tried it for 20 years. I don't think it works. Okay, so that's dealing with this, and I think that covers most of the comments in this chart. I feel that we are 20 years later. I do feel that it is time. You can only tweak this charter so much, and that's what I see you guys doing. You're just tweaking it. And it's either, yes, it is good, and you like the way it works. Personally, I don't think it's working anymore. I think it's time to look and move to the next level. What that level is, I mean, I heard people mention mayor, council, manager, board of selectmen. I think you really should take a moment, look at these options that are available, and even 20 years down the line, there are ways to incorporate the will of the people, the soul that Billy is talking about, by keeping your budget referendums, by keeping, if we're going to spend money over a certain amount of money, it goes to a town meeting, and things of that nature. But I think you have to look at, unfortunately, the bureaucracy that we have and try to come up a way to streamline it, because I believe now, since I've been on the outside and now on the inside, it truly needs to be streamlined. And that's all. If I can answer any other questions, please.
Beth, can you give me an example of when you say streamline, how would it streamline it to have say a manager, a council manager, how would it streamline it?
I think, and again, this is just my own observations from other towns. I would use the town manager as an example. A town manager is truly a day-to-day operational person. It's not someone that has to be concerned about being elected every 2 years or however they're elected. And the responsibility that town manager has is to the day-to-day operations. He looks at the town more from, I think, a less, and I hate to say the phrase, but I'm going to say it because it's easier to say it this way, from a political point of view. You know, he is at it 24/7. He's not worried about in July or September when election time comes, and they have to deal with the compound of having to be reelected to a position. And then there, along with those lines, there's oversight that's given to a town manager, and that can be in a form of council or board of selectmen, whatever you want to do. But there are other ways out there to keep some of that representation that you want and is needed on the books. Again, you would maybe eliminate a board of finance. You may not need a economic development. I'm just using these for economic. I'm looking at Sharon and I'm saying economic development. I'm sorry, Sharon. But, you know, there's ways to, if you really took that route, you could just look at the overall and come up with your own criteria as far as what you want to do. It's your call. It's your report. And again, I think we all have to remember it is a report. And say you choose to go that route and you choose to go, well, our report is going to include a town manager, RTM, or whatever you want to do. You're on the books, you're saying, okay, it may not go through. But you're on the books saying, okay, we have to really start looking at this. So 5 years from now, when they call the next charter revision, they're going to go back and look and see what you did. And I'm sure Nick or somebody can tell you, don't be concerned if you come up with something creative or idealistic like that. All the other changes that you want to preserve in the existing charter can be preserved by presenting it in a different way. So when it gets to the ballot, you're not losing the other work that you put into it.
Thank you.
I got to clarify one sentence. I know, in 1986, the first budget that the Bethel Action Committee defeated, the Board of Finance members said, we don't know why people voted no. He said, we don't know, do they want the budget higher? And that started the debate on advisory questions, because the Board of Finance needed the information as to what a rejected budget reflected from the electorate. And it was a big deal. We had one referendum with advisory questions that were so convoluted. It was awful. It was a laughing stock. It only happened once. And then we adopted the current protocol for advisory questions. But the advisory questions were there because the Board of Finance needed guidance.
Any other questions for Mr. Magna? No? Righty. All right, so we'll move on to the next item. So it's a discussion with First Selectman Knickerbocker on local government.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. The little remote control is not working, so if it's okay with you, I'm going to stand over here to just do a short presentation. Yeah, if you just hit the space bar. Yep. So this is a shortened version, vastly shortened version of a class that I do for CCM. What's that?
Committee members, there's that slide at the end, if you guys want
you have a copy
take
of
notes
that.
on.
And if anybody wants me to email this to them, I'll be happy to. This is a short version of a class that I do for newly elected people for CCM every other year. So if you hit the next one. This is just a real brief recap, because I know from your last meeting you wanted some more information. So this doesn't take a stand on any particular form of government. This is just informational so that you know what the different forms are. Because I can tell you, as long as I was doing volunteer work in town government before I was elected to this position, I had no idea there were so many different permutations. So just a very, very brief recap. The basic form of government is a triangle, you know, and this is just basic high school civics. So executive branch, judicial branch, legislative branch, and they share power, they counterbalance each other. Most forms of government in the United States follow this pattern, not perfectly, some vary greatly, some are messy, but this is the basis of what the Founding Fathers put together in the Constitution. Powers of our land come from the Constitution, and they derive from the people themselves. As Billy said, you know, this is the grassroots part of democracy. Powers not specified in the Constitution automatically fall to the states. So if you're a student of the Constitution and you read it, education, for example, does not appear anywhere in the U.S. Constitution. So there's a real neat provision that says anything that we didn't mention here just automatically goes to the states. So you'll find that there are some functions that fall to the states. The other thing that is not mentioned in the Constitution is local governments. They didn't care. They wanted people to just kind of do what they wanted to do. So again, that was delegated to the states. So in the United States, local governments are only empowered to exist according to state law. The most important part of this, and even though we all know this, we deal with it, the most important part of the power structure is the legislative body. The legislative body is the group, whatever group can take money out of your pocket, put you in jail, you know, establish laws, establish taxation, establish foreign policy, establish zoning laws. That's the legislative body that can do those things. And the legislative body is not the same in every form of local government. Obviously, just again to review, at the federal level, the legislative body is the U.S. Congress. At the state level, it's our erstwhile General Assembly, which is meeting right now, hopefully not performing too much mischief. And at the municipal level, the basic forms are either city council in some form, and there's a lot of different permutations, or town meeting. In Connecticut, we have what's called home rule. This is something that I kind of thought until I started studying this stuff that every state had, but it isn't. The other side of the coin is called general rule. In Connecticut, the state legislature many hundreds of years ago basically said, as long as you're not breaking the law, you can have any form of government you like. You get to choose, and you get to run your town or your burg or your borough any way that suits you. The other side of the coin is general rule. Texas is a state that has general rule, and actually they just switched recently from home rule to general rule. And in that format, they dictate exactly what local government, not only what form of local government, but what powers they have. So for example, if you were reading the paper this week, you might have noticed, I think last week, there was a piece in the News Times about how several towns in Connecticut had enacted their own bans on plastic bags. That's perfectly acceptable to do here in Connecticut. In other states, the state legislature literally says you have no authority to do those things unless we say you can. So some states have overruled some of those local ordinances that tried to, you know, enact local bans on things. So that's the description of home rule. We are a charter town, as was discussed. Not every town in Connecticut has a charter. You can have one or not, because we have home rule. If your town does not have a charter, then state law takes over and says you must have town meeting form of government. Town meeting form of government is the basis and it's the default position unless you choose to do something else. So the three basic types, and again, there's as many permutations as there are towns and cities in America, but the three basic types are mayor, city council. At one time, that was the most pervasive in the United States as it grew. There's a new one called council city manager, and then the one that we like is selectman town meeting. Mayor city council is exactly what it appears to be. In most cases, it conforms to the triangle, you know, the separation of powers. You have an elected mayor, you have a city council, and then you usually have like a courts structure. In a lot of parts of the country, there's a local court. You know, they do traffic fines and local ordinances and things like that. In some forms of mayor city council, the mayor is a voting member of the council, although usually not. In some forms, they have a veto power over the council. And this, at one time, yeah, let me just back up one little bit, that's all right. At one time, this was the most popular form of government. Now it's down to 38%, and I'll show you why in a minute. So to go on to the next one, there's actually two permutations that are more common. Strong mayor, this is in the org chart, and weak mayor. So if you see the difference in this form, actually I've got that wrong. In the strong mayor form of government, oh no, this is right. In the strong mayor form of government, you notice I have council here coded in yellow. That means that's the legislative body. They're the people that have the clout. So in this form, voters elect the council, voters elect the mayor. The mayor gets to pick who is in the department chairs. And by department chairs, I'm not talking about operational departments like DPW director. I'm talking about like the head of planning and zoning, head of the finance board, things that have actual authority. So in the strong mayor form, the mayor has a lot of power, a lot of authority. New York City is an example of strong mayor form of government. Not very many cities have this. They tend to be the really big ones that do. In the weak mayor format, there's a couple of different permutations, but generally the council picks those people who head up those other power centers within the power structure. Sometimes the mayor has a dotted line responsibility. Sometimes the mayor has a little bit more clout in who gets elected in here, but basically the council is the one that has the final decision. Most of the towns in Connecticut, in fact, I'm pretty sure all of the ones that have a mayor council form of government are weak mayor types, where there's more power sharing. Council manager is a new form that was invented, became popular beginning in the early 20th century. And think of it this way, our Board of Education, 9 members, is elected by popular vote in the town, and they hire a superintendent. We don't get to vote on the superintendent. And obviously the reason for that is you need a degreed professional educator to run that very important function. And basically, this is exactly the same thing that has become more popular in the U.S. This figure is actually a couple of years old, so it's probably closer to 60% now. So it is a elected council. Sometimes they're council at large, sometimes they're divided by ward, depending on the size of the city. And then they hire a degreed professional. The person is nonpartisan. And so there is no mayor, there is no first selectman. This is the city manager is the CEO of the city. Right now in Connecticut, there are 102 towns that still operate on town meeting form of government. 28 have switched to council manager, and 29 still maintain mayor council. So if we go on to the next one, this is a typical organizational chart for a council manager form of government. So the city council may delegate everything to the city manager. City manager may be in charge of everything. Some city councils have some control over that. It just depends on how the folks in those towns want to structure it. Selectmen town meeting, where we came from, starting in the late 1600s. Selectmen town meeting government is it's mostly the purest form that still exists of direct democracy, although by virtue of our charter, some legislative functions are delegated, but for the most part, the legislative body is the people who have the clout. So it's like when I tell people who move to Bethel for the first time, imagine you're in a city council of 12,000 people, because you're a voting member and you have the clout. Started in, as Sharon and I have talked about this a lot, started as church governance. In the early days of the colonies and then moving into the new nation in the late 1700s, there was no such thing as separation of church and state. Local government was the church. If you can imagine, if you read any of Pat Wild's books, when the Congregational Church wanted to, the folks in that group, that parish, had to get on their horses and buggies or walk all the way into Deer Hill and Danbury to go to church on Sundays. And for almost 100 years, they petitioned to have their own congregational church. And you guys know who gave them permission to do it? State legislature. You know, not like going to a church authority. It was actually the state legislature that had to give permission to build a church, which just sounds like a crazy thing in today's world. The last church that was built in Connecticut, and I don't know what town it was, but it built with public funds, was built in 1813. So the idea of the separation of church and state took a while for it to hang on. This is found today in only 5% of all U.S. municipalities, and they're all here. Few in upstate New York, north of Albany, but it is a unique New England tradition. There were some settlers that moved west in the mid-1800s to Northern California. They tried it for a while, and then they did other things. So if you wonder why newcomers who move to this area, they get a job, they come to Bethel, and their head starts to spin when you start talking about public hearings and town meetings, that's why, because I can tell you there is no awareness. Nobody teaches this in school, in civics classes, anywhere in the United States. Unfortunately, not even here to the degree I would like. So moving on, it's just to recap, began with church governance. The primary feature is it's very decentralized. Power is shared among different boards and commissions. And that is, it creates an ambiguity, and it really is remarkable that it works as well as it does. Because if we go to the next slide, if you notice those other org charts were really clean and simple, and just follow those lines and take a look at how this works, and you might say, how does this work? So you have the voters, here's the legislative body, they elect some, the most important boards and commissions, they elect a board of selectmen, they elect the first selectman. So this part right here kind of represents the executive branch, because it's, according to the charter, section 3, it's my job to make sure things are running. But there are some legislative duties that are delegated here. They're not extensive, but this person also votes on there. So you don't have imagine that the president could go into Congress and vote. So it's not a real clean separation of powers. There are judicial functions, because when you get down here, appointed boards and commissions, you have zoning board of appeals, assessment board of appeals, but then they also do legislative actions too that are delegated, like creating zoning laws for the town to follow. So it's a very complex thing. Back in the colonial days, they wanted it this way. The one thing they did not want was, because they had the crown, the King of England, was sending governors over here to try to keep everybody under control. And the last thing they wanted, and the people who were coming over here were loyal to the crown, not to the local people. So they wanted this to be as hard as possible. They wanted it to be complicated and decentralized, so that you didn't have somebody here that could just do whatever they wanted. So moving on, there is another new permutation of town meeting form of government, which we call RTM, or representative town meeting. So look at the difference here. I've color-coded this in yellow because the voters, even though this is town meeting government, the voters are not the legislative body anymore. In this form of government, they have what they call a representative town meeting. So the way this came about, and everybody in this room, I think, has been to a town meeting where we have to, appropriate some money for something that's unexpected, and you get 3 or 4 people show up for it, and you spend $500,000 with 3 votes. Well, some towns said that's not good enough. We know people don't have a lot of time to come to meetings, so we're going to create what we call a representative town meeting and let people run for this. So it's actually elected, and what they do is these folks pledge for a certain period of time, say 2 years. They say, I will make sure that I go to all town meetings, to the best of ability that I can. And it's a very unusual thing, because some towns have 60 people on this, some towns have 150. I think Greenwich has over 200 people in a representative town meeting. So, and they're very active. So so we have a town meeting form of government where 12,000 people could come to a meeting. They have a town meeting form of government where 200 people actually do. And that's, so everything else is pretty much the same in the representative town meeting. Right now, there are 6 towns in Connecticut that operate that. Westport, Waterford, Greenwich, Fairfield, Darien, Branford, and Trumbull and New Canaan have representative town meeting. Then go on to the next slide. I think that might be the end. Yeah, that's it. So just briefly, those are the basic forms. Most of that material I got from this book, which is, you know, it's scintillating reading. It's called Local Government in Connecticut. If you ever have insomnia or you're really interested in this stuff, please feel free to borrow this, or I could get you another copy. This is sold through Wesleyan University Press. So can I answer any questions? Did I put you to sleep that fast? It's like magic, isn't it?
I think that was fabulous.
Thank you.
It was a really good presentation.
There's one other thing that I put in your packet. I gave you this presentation. I gave you the list of towns that have the different forms of government. And I also gave you a description, a sample, just in case you're interested in it, city manager job description. This I downloaded from ICMA, which is the International City Management Association. So if you go back to that slide where I said, you know, you hire a degreed professional to run a town, this gives you the basic idea of what that job entails. However, this is really important. You don't need to change the whole government if you want to have a city manager. There are probably 24 towns in Connecticut now that have town meeting government, and they have a selectman, board of selectmen, but they also have a city manager or a town manager who reports to that board of selectmen to do the management, like the nuts and bolts stuff. I was at a CCM conference yesterday, and West Hartford's mayor was sitting next to me, and her town manager came with her. So the first selectman or the mayor is still the CEO of the town, the chief elected official, but it's sort of like having a parallel position to the town comptroller or chief financial officer. It's like a chief operating officer to do the management, you know, the day-to-day management stuff. Simsbury is a town that just switched to that form a few years ago. They had a first selectman form that was just like ours, where the first selectman was sort of like the political person, but 90% of the job is city management. And what they did was they made the first selectman part-time, and then they have a city manager position. So now the Board of Selectmen just does the legislative stuff and nothing else, and then the city manager reports to that board, and the city manager is full-time. The only thing I'll tell you is that city managers get paid a lot more than first selectmen do, a lot. It's more like in Connecticut, like the 130 to 160 range or more, depending on the size. So, and I'm not advertising. I'm just giving you information. So, any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I think now we're gonna go through a lot of the proposals we've heard, both from the Board of Selectmen, from the public, and decide whether we're gonna pursue them. And if there's some that we want council to start to formulate language on.
The proposed modifications that I emailed y'all, it's in this packet also.
Yep.
So if you wanna.
Yeah, so we'll just kind of go one by one there.
It's in that packet.
Just so we can kind of start, you know, trimming the fat and identifying where we really want to investigate and get more information, so we can formulate stronger opinions. So I'm working on the one from 419.
Yep.
It's still good.
There you go.
Yep. From
So-
April 9th, right?
Yeah, yep.
Thank you.
Right. So, you know, looking at Section A, change term of office to 4 years from two. The Board of Selectmen is only remaining like a board with a 2-year term. The term of office should be made 4 years to reflect the realities of the time required to conduct town affairs. So I think this kind of encompasses a much larger conversation, considering some of the information we've come across in the last couple meetings. So I don't know if this specifically is what we're gonna pursue, but I think there's certainly some conversations around how our government's structured, particularly from the chief administrative spot. So I don't have a sense of either yay or nay on this, so to speak.
Oh, I do,
Yeah,
I do. I
Okay.
think that it should still remain to be a 2-year elected position and not added to 4 years.
Okay.
So somehow this got written down as proposed, so if it's gonna still stay on a list of proposed, it should be 2 years, not 4 years.
so you're just, from this proposal, changing the term of office, not increasing,
No, keeping it to 2 years. This says
Yeah.
that to change it from a 2-year elected to a 4-year, and I'm not in favor of that. I don't know
Okay.
how that got it in print.
well,
I don't know that we voted on it.
No, but this is just all the proposals that have come to us
Proposals.
throughout the information.
Okay, I thought this was after the first couple of months of
No.
us discussing that.
No.
We shifted it down and got to this.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
But in that's what I'm saying is looking at our form of government in a much bigger perspective than simply adjusting terms of office for the Board of Selectmen.
All I did with this was go through all of our minutes from the previous meetings, and anything that was proposed, I just condensed it into one worksheet for you so that you could kind of work
Okay,
off
this
of
was
it.
proposed, but not by this committee. The
No,
commission, it was-
just
it was from the
things
selectmen's
that have
office.
been discussed.
Perfect.
So these are suggested.
They're just the,
modifications.
yes.
Okay.
Are we gonna follow this order, or can we jump around?
It might be easier just to follow the order. I mean, we'll get to
I
everything.
think we should follow the order.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Because the majority of the people spoke on one issue that I think we could resolve very quickly and get it out of the way, about where they can hold their meetings.
Yeah, that's.
I think that's the easiest thing.
Yeah, and that's,
And to make that, them sit around and wait till we're at the very end, I don't think it's fair.
I think since our initial meeting, we've all been in agreement that we're gonna correct that. It'll be remedied,
It was just like
To
a
make
motion
sure-
text amendment we were gonna fix, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
That the police commission can meet at the police department and
Any board
Library
commission
can
can
meet.
meet where appropriate, right?
and not, put the town in non-compliance with its own charter.
Just so, it was amended in 2014, that if there was not space at municipal, we could meet at the library. That is part of charter.
Yeah.
Right.
Currently.
And I was on that commission, and I think it was a thought of proximity.
Right, Right.
And at that point, the police department renovation was an issue.
right, right.
So quite a few things have changed within the
Okay,
community.
just so that it's
Yeah,
understood.
so I don't think there's any controversy or
Not
disagreement.
as long as they
amongst the board.
post where they're meeting.
Always do.
Yeah,
The library board
even the
is an
site.
exception to the current charter.
Correct.
For the library.
Correct.
To meet for convenience.
Yeah.
Very
Right.
vague, very broad. and-
Right.
Pat, when you walk a site, do you post that you're going to walk a specific site at a specific date and time?
We do.
Okay. Thank you.
One,
I
that
always
one's,
have.
that one's easy when we start working on language.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed to delete it entirely.
I think to have as broad as possible to meet the evolving needs of any commission or.
Yeah, that just seems like an easy one, thank you.
You know, I mean, because, as written, with the construction going on at the schools, technically the Board of Ed couldn't go over and do any eyes-on stuff there as well, so. All right. So now we'll return back to the
Thank you.
regular flow. Thanks for the suggestion, Sharon. Eligibility for office. Section B currently prohibits town employees from serving on the Board of Finance, Planning, Zoning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Inland Wetlands Commission. Consideration should be given to the following: include Board of Assessment Appeals in the prohibition, prohibit Board of Finance members from simultaneously serving on any other board or commission to prevent conflicts of interest with regard to funding. I think those are all viable amendments to consider, and just a sounder method of governance. All right, annual town meeting, budget referendum, non-binding advisory question. Remove the non-binding too high, too low advisory question as they are ineffective in providing guidance. Voters have consistently selected too high regardless of whether the budget is passed or failed. Eliminating the two advisory questions would allow room for additional items to be considered on the ballot. Continue with that? Do we want to debate that anymore?
I would love to debate it, because I think the question should stay. I think we talked about that in length. I think if we do any changing, I'm okay with too high, too low, and just right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that boards and commissions or the first selectman, the Board of Ed, I remember years ago, had a scheme and they said, let's all go out and vote no, too low. Okay, so they obviously believed in that advisory question. I think that the question should stay. I think the Board of Finance needs guidance on which way to go. And the only thing I heard about taking that out of the charter was there wasn't enough room on the ballot to do other things. The Board of Electors came in, Tim Beal came in and said there's plenty of room on the ballot to put a question.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it yesterday, you could
Right.
easily spread
So
out.
I don't think it hurts anything.
Too high, too low.
Yeah. I use it both ways.
I'm sort of ambivalent about that. I think a lot of people don't respond when they're being just yes or no, so they're really not giving us, the Board of Finance, too much guidance there. So I don't know that it's, I don't know the participation, my understanding was there's not a lot of participation in the non-binding. So I just don't know how informative it has been, but I mean, I see an adverse reason. I just don't, I just don't feel strongly when we're together. I don't know that it's that helpful.
I can tell you from working at the polls also that there's confusion with the too high, too low. We have a lot of people asking us what that means. And we can't sit there giving them advice.
What if you like it?
Right.
They want just right.
They want just
Right.
right there. I can say it for myself, there's times I haven't voted too high, too low, because I thought it was just right. I liked the budget.
And people don't understand, many people, if you're not involved, wouldn't understand that if it wasn't explained to you.
Yeah.
They're gonna think they should put something and they start vacillating and
And that's gonna be kind of the crux of a lot of our debate is the nuance of how we govern. And, you know, the impetus of that is 30 years old, and, you know, people with historical knowledge of the town understand why I was put in. But people moving into town or unfamiliar with our form of government don't really understand that it holds no weight, other than providing information for the Board of Finance should the budget not pass.
Right, but the question really doesn't hurt, but if the question's there, they didn't go there to answer that question. They went there to either vote yes or no, so the people that understand the question answer it, and then we have information to give the Board of Finance. The other people that don't understand it, it might go either way, but at least it gives a chance for the voter to speak what they really mean.
But how many people, when they vote too low, really mean too low?
They don't have to answer the question, they could just
No,
vote yes or no.
but there's still people that vote too low.
A protest vote to a
Yeah,
TI.
you know,
Yeah.
so what does that tell us?
Yeah, but that's not the one that means the vote passed, the budget passed or not. So when they don't pass, it's good to have the information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a question. Based on comments that are being made, if someone here in the audience now has a question based on what they're hearing, are they allowed any input at this time?
Typically, no, that's reserved, just, the meetings could go on forever if it's just an open conversation. Yeah, and we've already had one, and then when we return, that's gonna be part of this process, clearing this up. So we have a more concise, proposal moving forward to the public.
I'd like to hold off and include this with our whole discussion on the budget.
So we'll continue. All right, so the failure to adopt component of the bifurcated budget votes.
I also think that's a budget discussion, when we discuss everything.
Yeah, and my only concern with it is we're spending a lot of time talking about how convoluted our governance can be. This kind of adds another component to that it
Certainly does.
it failed, but it didn't fail. You know, it's you know. So again, if our challenge is educating our voters how to properly engage with the operations of the town, we're kind of throwing another monkey wrench, into it. So it's kind of, they're either, it's one budget or two budgets, but this kind of in-between thing would be difficult to explain. I'm sure anybody who's involved gets plenty of text messages and calls. And what are we voting on again today for the fourth time this month? Yeah.
I think it might be helpful to just find out what other towns do that have two budgets. What do they do when they get, one passes and the other doesn't? Is there any kind of self-adjusting provision? Do they?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I just think it might be helpful just to have all the information out on the table. And I don't know that we know the answer to that.
Yeah, so yeah, I think continue in terms of investigation, but see where that's been used appropriately. I provided a packet for the members as well, and it has some information about historically how bifurcated budgets came into play. And it's actually not that long that they've been into play. It was since 2004, there was a state Board of Education versus Naugatuck, where the ruling allowed for the separation of the budgets. And on the back, you can see there's a handful of towns use bifurcated budgets. And surprising, like some who I thought did, Newtown, Brookfield and such do not, or at least as this was reported in 2011. So we'll continue with that one as well, in some form or fashion.
I just want to say that when we split the budget, I think that the town and the Board of Ed always gave a more responsible budget because they knew they were on their own. If the Board of Ed came in and said, I want a 15%, they assumed, well, we might get it, or the Board of Finance is going to take money out of the town side of the road budget really quick, but we're going to get what we want. So I'm just in favor of keeping it separate, and I understand the failure to adopt thing, and I get that, but I think it's important, and we get a more responsible budget when they're split.
Yeah.
I think that.
And I think some of the challenge we face is that with 5 million this year, that overlaps the two. And how do we? And I think this year was much better in terms of educating what that overlap is. But it's kind of a bizarre accounting mechanism, particularly on the maintenance side, where I think it's like 80-something% of it, it goes towards the schools. But and so just again, it's an educational component, and it's
the last 2 or 3 turnarounds, 3-4%, depending on contractual, obligations. Those are responsible budgets. I remember having to swallow 9%.
Yeah.
As a taxpayer, 9%, you're looking at like, what? I didn't get a 9% increase. But when we split the budget, all of a sudden things got, for some reason, they were more reasonable.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Without a doubt. Okay. Action requiring referendum. Currently, section C6-8 applies not only to all taxpayer-funded capital projects in excess of $1 million, but also by extension all capital utility projects not funded by tax revenue, rather by user fees. The referendum requirement comes into play even though utility projects have no impact on the town budget and do not rely on general tax revenue. In the past, a referendum has required just to approve the acceptance of revolving water loans from the state in order to maintain and improve the town's public water system, even in the cases where the state has mandated certain repairs and upgrades under penalty of fines for noncompliance. The low limit of $1 million has resulted in harmful delays, expenses of conducting referendums in order to execute non-optional system upgrades. So the recommendation is to raise the referendum trigger to $2 million for capital utility projects that are funded exclusively through user fees, grants, and or loans. So I don't think there's much
opposition.
Yeah.
I think
That's okay.
it's legitimate.
And it's, kind of the law of unintended consequences, when we became a water company.
Everything costs $1 million in the water industry.
Appointments by the Board of Selectmen. All members of appointed boards and commissions shall be qualified electors of the town and shall vacate their positions upon ceasing to be electors of the town. This section should identify who has authority to remove an appointed board or commission member when it's clear that the individual no longer resides in town. In practice, Neither the registrars nor the town clerk feel they have the authority to take this action without a written resignation. And in many cases, it has been difficult to contact the individual who has moved to obtain their cooperation. I think this might be something we want to look at, how some other towns
Yeah,
utilize
sure,
it, and,
yeah.
you know, what,
Get verbiage that works, because it's obviously a problem with boards and commissions. If
Yeah.
you're not gonna show and you're not gonna participate, you need to be off.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sorry, if you're out of the
If you're
town.
moved, especially if you're.
Yeah, the same way we don't take kids from other towns, we can't take board members and commissioners from other towns. It should be equitable. So Nick, you wanna put that on your list to find?
Do some
See how they're doing.
Yeah.
research it.
Public Utilities Commission, and this one is revised since our initial submission. The recommendations add 2 additional appointed positions to bring the total board representation to 4. 4 appointed and 3 elected, being the 3 members of the Board of Selectmen. Over the past 2 decades, water waste and water operations have evolved into very technical and highly regulated operations. Management of public utilities increasingly demands a relatively high level of expertise within these fields. To revise description of the position of the Director of Public Utilities to reflect the status as an employee of the Public Utilities Commission and reporting to the First Selectman. Duties of the Director of Public Utilities include strategic planning and advising the PUC on operations of the water and sewer department. Again, I think this kind of coincides with the proposal at the top of the page, just kind of tightening up our operations in terms of that. You know, maybe just making sure we're setting up the structure appropriately, so we don't, you know, leave a mess for the next charter group. Department of Public Works.
So you're saying okay on that one?
I think, yeah, do you guys,
Yeah,
is there any? Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Department of Public Works. This section describes the duties of the department. The recommendation is to remove references to water and sewer functions, which are now contained in the Utilities Department, and add roads, grounds, fleet vehicles, buildings, project management to the description, and I think, did Ms. Cavagna?
Drainage.
Drainage, yeah,
Drainage,
yeah, put drainage in that as well. Okay. Again, I think that's, you know, it's kind of housekeeping component, just make sure people's job descriptions are, you know, the work they're held accountable for. And then technical change, data processing department should now be the information technology department. That was probably put in '89, right, Billy, data processing?
Yeah.
Is that early?
Yeah, it was 89. Your mother was on the
Such a
commission.
nice-
Your mother was on the
That was
commission.
a really forward-thinking term.
That's a 70s term.
Yeah.
It was way back.
70s term.
IT department is probably like a 90s, so catching up. Reference to newspapers, change the word newspapers to publications to allow greater flexibility in publication of legal notices.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
I think it's a great idea, and that was the best thing that I've heard. Nick, you were gonna research because Brookfield uses a penny saver. How did you do that research?
Well, I mean, it's still, the state statutes haven't caught up to the sense of it.
How did they get away with it?
I don't know.
There's no lawsuits? I mean, is that what's
Well,
happening?
yeah, there's gotta be an aggrieved party, right? That feels-
The first time someone complains and it's put to the courts will
Decide
decide whether it's legal or not. I mean, there's still many state statutes that have language that says a newspaper in general circulation. Specifically,
The news, yeah.
the zoning statutes that still have a newspaper of general circulation in the town and municipality. So, I mean, I think the idea to change the publications to make it a broader term,
Certainly helps.
then it's up to our management whether or not we want to test it or wait
Yeah.
for the state statutes to catch up. What we cannot do is contravene or contradict state statute. We can go further, to make it a little more broader, to make it more clear.
Oh, well, we should suggest our legislators to make it legal then.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
something that so many towns are having trouble with and finding not economical and not to make sense anymore, then it's something they should get on.
It's true.
That's that, then we don't have to guess and we don't have to wonder for breakthroughs.
I'd love to see a legislator take up that.
Maybe we should ask that.
Yeah, we should.
Cynthia knows the answers to all your questions. I know you can't let her talk, but she knows, she's the expert in all the legal stuff.
I do. It says publications, newspapers, it's kind of waffly. Hamden's been using the penny saver or the alternate publication for 50 years. Brookfield does it too. There's never been a case brought for it, and the language in the state statute is very vague. So I've been pushing for the penny saver for so long that I'm sort of shocked to hear people even talking about it, because I presented and presented and
And the
presented.
case brought forth was by the News Times.
And
Neil Marcus
oh my
represented the
God.
penny
That's where
saver.
cases are going to be brought by. Obviously, the newspaper lobby is going to.
Of course,
Okay.
Brookfield does it, it's
Well, whatever
bad.
the vehicle is, I think it needs to be circulated to your mailbox. I don't
Yes.
think that you should be able to just pick it up at Bethel Food. I think it needs to be in my mailbox on
I agree.
Thursday.
What about technically?
So, and I think that
Why do we circulate?
at the very least, the simple change gives the leadership the latitude to,
To do whatever it
yeah.
is.
And I think circulation has to be key. I mean,
Absolutely.
The statute still says circulation.
Right.
Yeah, it can't be hidden. Yeah, you can't suppress the access to information.
Correct. Great.
Okay.
I'm sorry, how did we read that one then?
Yeah.
I think you were gonna just reconfirm that why or how other towns have the ability to do
I
it.
can look at the other towns' language in their charters specifically.
And obviously, to drop the hook a little bit, Nick, no one's going to recommend that you do something that they can't hang their hat on, right? So he's going to be like,
Right.
I can't really advise you to do that. So I don't think we should really take that punch without.
Oh, they're having the.
Yeah, to actually
Yeah,
change our charter,
right.
which we've been living with for 5 years. So I think it'd be a good idea to suggest to our state reps, this is a problem, this is an issue, can you clean it up for us? Because a lot of other towns have this problem.
Well, if it's already vague language, then why can't we just use our vague language? I mean, who's gonna sue us? I don't know.
Somebody.
I don't know.
Somebody.
On my street.
Right.
And that's, I canceled it a year ago, so it comes. So,
Lucky
you.
I don't know, I'm telling you as
But
a charter revision
I know
committee
you're
member, I'm
too.
gonna say no,
Yeah.
no to that idea.
No, I agree.
I agree.
No,
Not unless it's legal. I don't think we
do
should
you
do
want it
it.
in the News Times?
More people probably read the penny saver than they do the News Times when it comes to town issues.
Penny saver goes
Well,
to every home.
maybe we could find some more creative language that says, at this point, okay, it's newspapers, but it could be, if in the future, the state, approves any other type of publication media, that
And that's
we would be
true.
able to do that.
You can broaden it.
So that we could
Well,
broaden
but we have
language
to try to
and
ready for it.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we sort of
and
got a self-implementing
Right.
thing there
Yeah.
if that happens, so that we're ready to move on to that 5 years for change.
The Public Utilities Commission uses it for our water report. We get much more important than water. They don't put it in the News Times, they put it in the 8,000 households. The water report from the PUC, the annual report with all the state numbers, all comes to you through the PUC, through the penny saver, not the News Times.
Because the penny saver goes to every home.
Every home.
And if you read the statute, it doesn't just say newspapers, it goes between publications widely circulated, a publication that's widely circulated. That's
Penny
the
saver.
thing.
Not, for instance, like the zoning statutes.
Well, maybe that's
And it's not,
Land use is different.
it's not consistent, which is a problem.
Nick.
So then,
Okay.
what are we doing,
Nick.
what are we
Okay.
publishing, what
All
are
right.
the booker
Cut this
standards?
discussion with them.
Let's move on to the next, we'll pursue this.
That's still on the list.
Yep. So, our tax collector and SACO presented information regarding a request to move the annual town meeting from May to April during the last charter review, so the 2014 one, and why she supports continuing with the schedule, see attachment. Loss of revenue associated with late billing, the town has accomplished it and received all necessary information to move forward with the annual town meeting in April. It's not guaranteed to have any necessary information from the state if we wait until May for the annual meeting. If I remember correctly, Register of Voters Beeble kind of echoed that, right? That it was the we really can get pushed up against a time crunch in terms of printing our ballots for our Scantron machines by shortening that period. So I don't see any.
So,
yeah,
so I was really opposed to this when this recommendation came.
Mhm.
Now, all the testimony from Bob, from everybody, I heard that even if we pushed the budget back till October, we wouldn't have real concrete numbers, right? I mean, that's what they made me believe, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't know what the insurance costs were, we wouldn't know a lot of the state funding, right, reimbursement, right? And that was gonna,
Something's changing.
right? So even if we did it in July, we would still be guessing at those numbers. That's what Bob told me to control, right?
Yeah.
And everybody believes that to be the case.
It's, yeah, it's, you know, we see it on the board, it's, you go off
Your best information at the
and-
time.
Mhm.
Well, right, but at the time, that's the important part.
Yeah.
So if April is not the time because the end of May is a better time, but everybody tells me at the end of May, we still wouldn't have the right numbers.
No.
Correct?
Yeah. I mean, we just finished, you know, our referendum yesterday and it failed once, you know, that pushed it out.
Every 2 years, I'm sorry, because the
Yeah.
state tells us what we're gonna get, so every other year,
Yeah.
it would be, but we need to be consistent.
And there's still no clarity out of Hartford in terms of which way's up and which direction we're going, and, you know, and it'll probably go to June 1st, I'm guessing, as well, you know,
Yeah.
so.
But they don't have the deadlines we have,
Mhm.
so they decide
Right.
to decide.
Right,
You know,
right.
So that's.
But that's the reason why we're trying to push this further forward,
Right, so-
because,
Right, so leaving here is more hazard to town operations and running things and making decisions and getting money, and then cost of collecting money and lost interest. Those are real things that we do, that we sacrifice if we push the date out further. We know, but what are we gaining if we push the date out further? Maybe more information, but not necessarily. Because how long would you have to wait for all those things to be known?
right, it sounded like we have to wait way too long to get them, and we'd still be
Exactly.
waiting.
Exactly.
Because the other side is having the real numbers and having a real budget, but that's what you're weighing against, that's the problem. And I believe when everybody told me that in July, we still wouldn't have the real numbers, so.
Yeah, it's not.
Which is terrible.
Okay.
Suzanne,
Trying to look
work
through.
with it.
the
I'm
rest
not
of these.
ready to vote on that, on this particular thing yet.
You want to continue discussion, or?
Mhm, I would like to.
Okay.
Put all these budget things together and do one night of just budget, anything that relates to the budget, if we could, please.
Sure.
I'd be in favor of that.
All right. Just trying to read through to see if there's any kind of clear direction other than this informational stuff shared.
We did, where's the section on changing, how we handle the bidding process and how we have to have like shovel-ready numbers and.
that
It's
was
down
the- yeah,
under
sorry,
Paul
yeah.
Zakowski.
Paul
from the-
Zakowski.
yeah, From the public
That was
hearing.
just public input, right?
Yep. Then from Terry Yansky, the Director of Fiscal Services for the Board of Education, that we look into including purchasing cooperatives in the bidding process.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a useful technique in the past, and just, it's not permissible, I guess, under the current verbiage in the charter. So just include that, so it's an option, not that it's going to be the rule, but it's a tool they can utilize. if
That she
necessary.
could do if it, right, minus
Ju-
the
Yeah.
Is there a fee to for this service, for them to do it?
I think it was nominal.
Yeah,
she
it
said,
was pennies,
and it's
compared to the savings.
it's the fee that comes from the vendor. Is they want to be in the consortium to be able to bid on the.
So who
municipal-
writes the specs? For the, well, say, she was talking about band uniforms.
Mhm.
So who writes the specifications of what kind of band uniforms the town of Bethel wants, or the Board of Ed wants?
I'd probably assume that the marching band director, somebody who close to.
So it is local, that we we don't leave it, because she said something about them helping with specifications.
Like for boilers,
Yeah.
I think we'd have to get clarification
I
on
do
that.
too.
I'm not
I'd
sure
like
about the
to.
band uniforms. I think for the more technical
That's what
stuff
it
that
was.
you're talking about, like boilers and things like this, where we might not have the in-house expertise to
Mhm.
actually do that, to have somebody who really knows more than
Okay.
we do. She was thinking we would get the benefit of their experience
And would
and
then,
background.
would they charge extra to write these specifications out?
Right, isn't
For
there a
us?
charge for that? I thought she said there was a charge for
I
that.
think we need to get some more
Yeah.
details.
I'd
from
like
her.
to,
We do.
yeah.
So we can go back to
Yeah.
her and find that out, or ask her
Okay.
to come back, or just give her a list of questions
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds
about
good.
That's a-
specifically when they write the specs
Right.
and,
Yeah.
And then do they charge, is there a fee for their services to
Right.
do this for us?
It's really common practice in the industry where you join a consortium and you pay an annual dues usually.
So who pays the annual dues though? The
Yeah.
Board of Ed?
we would,
Yeah.
but it's pretty nominal.
Is it?
If
Yeah,
you
it's
have
less
a
than
few
$200
projects
or
and of course
something,
it just seems like a
Compared to the
more
savings,
efficient
right.
process.
And they provide a template for you and you can massage that template, edit that template. And at least you have a basic, like you don't forget things. They might have little line items that you
Yeah.
wouldn't have thought of, like, the buttons.
Well, can
need
you
to
have
be
Terry
colored.
either come back and talk to us, maybe? And explain
Sure.
it to us? Thank you.
Would y'all like to put together a list of questions to
I
present
think
to
that might be
Terry?
easier, just so we have it in a written
Right.
form, that we can refer to.
Okay, do you want to do that now, or would you like for me to email you and remind you of putting these questions together?
Yeah, I can send her an email, just to ask, clarify the value of this and what have some of the bottlenecks.
Okay.
Procedures, and
Yeah.
the
Right,
procedures to
fees.
do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
What
Thank
the
you.
obligation is, as far as what if somebody writes up the proposal and then we don't like the proposal?
Mhm.
We feel like it's
Yeah.
not gonna work, then what? Are we locked into anything?
Yeah.
Typically, I've done a lot of them. Typically, you just get a draft of an RFP, and then you modify it for your needs. They don't really care if you use it exactly like they have it or not. You just modify it for your own needs. Just supplying it with a draft and a baseline to do things. And they use it in medicine all the time because it's so detailed.
Mhm.
You need to ask a gazillion questions, and generally they have things in there you might not have thought of. So that's why you do it. But it's usually not expensive.
No. And it creates a higher level of accountability for the vendor as well, because they don't want to, there's plenty of sharks out there that'll screw over an individual school system.
Yeah.
But, if they're gonna do it to the consortium, they're out. And,
Okay.
It's a much more long-term relationship. that is-
Okay, if you could just ask her some questions, I'd
Sure.
appreciate it.
So this was brought up, but the title here says new charter item. It was what Paul Zetkowski was talking about,
Yeah.
the project. So I don't want that to get lost in just public input. I
Mhm.
think that was an important part, and it makes a lot of sense. So often are these big projects come forward, and we don't really know what we're voting on and how much the project really costs. I'm okay with spending more money up front to have engineered plans that have a real dollar amount of what the project should cost. So I think that however we need to get that into our recommendations, or at least debate it, I think is worthwhile.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the solution might be having to outline a clearer process, like adding in those phases,
Well, you're talking about building phases?
or not even the bit, not just the shovel ready is what Paul's saying, because we're kind of going from.
Well, how Bethel's done it before is we get a pretty picture, we spend the money on an architect, and we say we fall in love with the picture, and we say, let's go vote on that, and somebody comes up and says, it's 14 million,
Yeah.
but there's not engineered plans to say it's really 17 million, because somebody really went through the blueprints, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think that we should really have that should be part of what we're.
Yeah, so it almost be like a referendum to approve like an investigatory phase, right?
Right.
Like
Because somebody might vote yes for 10 million, but if the real cost is 15 million, they might say, well, we really can't afford that, right?
Yeah, yep. Okay.
So put an addition on your house and somebody says it'll cost 1,000 and it really costs 3, you would have said no.
So we need to, in our discussions later on define a process, because there's gotta be an earlier process whereby
Absolutely.
the cost of all this engineering gets approved.
Right.
Just to
Right.
do all that due diligence to get to the point where you know that you
Yep.
really.
The true, right.
The cost will be.
Trying to eliminate surprises.
Yep.
Cost
And then there still will be surprises, trust me. Right.
Deanna, is that a proposed change, or is that as is? The section C10-2E, the Board of Finance shall hold one or more public meetings and public hearings on the general town budget?
That is the way that it is written, and then I put the proposed change in
Okay.
to seven days, or I'm sorry,
Oh,
not
I
less
see,
than
okay.
7 days, no more than 14.
Okay.
While you're talking about that, Lisa Plum, when she came in to vote yesterday, she said she had a real problem that the seniors are not given the opportunity to participate in town meetings, because we have them at night, we have them away up at the high school, some of them don't have cars. And was there any way that we could do something that they could participate and know what's going on? And I happened to talk to Bob Manfredo last night, and we have the capabilities of filming anything. And would it be possible, this is just, I'm throwing this off and having thought about her, that possible that once the town meeting or the public hearing is taped, that then the seniors who are interested could either come up here and watch it on this TV, or they could maybe have it in their downstairs. But something that they saw what was going on. Because she said so many of them say, well, we don't know anything, we don't feel like we're part of the input, but they want us to come vote. And they really do come out to vote.
Oh, yeah.
We get wheelchairs, walkers, canes, the whole gambit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's there's any mechanism we can address in the charter for that. I think that's more of a convenience thing in terms of working with the senior center and getting it published down there in BETV.
But I think we
It's a big
need to
thing.
remember that there is, and that's a large voting group that are not coming out to meetings at night.
Is there anything that prohibits us from having our town meetings on a Saturday?
Not soccer in the spring.
Well, I'm just thinking of the busy family person. I remember those days where I was raising a family and working full-time and getting home and throwing the pots and pans on the stove and all that. You're exhausted by 7 o'clock at night. So I'm just thinking of how many people might prefer if we would do it on a Saturday, like at 10 a.m. or something.
Just as many people would complain it's a Saturday. and not-
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I'm not saying to change it, I'm just saying to add another level of participation. I just think it's something we should maybe think about.
Well, we also have the bus now. We have the seniors got the bus there that they could, you know, usually the bus only runs during the hours that the senior center's open, but maybe we could fix that.
You know, Lisa said that she would make that available if that gets to be the only
That's an idea.
Okay.
result.
But yeah, again, I think that's
Available
it's
in
probably
town.
more of an internal solution, you know, between the senior center and town leadership. States the annual budget summary. Oh, so that's the correction right down there, right? Oh, no, it's
To get it from 7 to 14.
yeah. Okay. So going to Mr. Witkowski's. So that's revisiting the shovel-ready plans
Right.
for capital projects over $2 million.
We're gonna formulate that a little bit more, because I don't even know where to start, maybe
Yeah.
drafting without some more direction.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
town meeting wanted removed. Talk about that. Mr. LeBrecq supported raising the required amount to $2 million for the referendum, and increasing the selectmen's terms. So all those things are on our list for further discussion. Mr. Straight endorses the shovel-ready proposal on the public utilities.
$2 million. Yep.
Okay. Eliminating too high, too low. Okay. Yeah, then the last discussion, there was discussion of making the town clerk a higher position instead of elected position. As pointed out, the town clerk is meeting expectations. Both parties can endorse that person during re-election. I think she'd go on like 5 or 6 terms under that. Because of that stability and her competency, I think now would be an appropriate time to assess that change. Just because other communities.
Isn't that mandated by statute, that a town clerk has to be elected?
Nope. Other communities have gone and made it appointed or hired, and then often they take the most competent local town clerk and bring them over to their.
Nick, do you, I thought that was, no?
Because
Yeah.
towns and municipalities are all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, like Lori Kayback was at Danbury forever and went on a little, yeah. So.
I think our current situation works really well. I think if we have a great town clerk, I think that both parties endorse and she gets elected, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that I don't think it works well, I just thought it's almost positive, I read someplace it was mandated by statute that he or she be elected for a term of 4 to 6 years.
It's mandated by our charter right now.
By state statute.
I don't believe by state statute.
No,
I looked it
don't.
up. Okay, I'll look it up again, but, no, I agree, I just wanted to make sure we're doing it properly.
Yeah, and, you know, when I went in to sign for my seat in this commission, she said she doesn't want to be hired, she wants to be elected, she likes that. 'Cause- But nonetheless, I think it'd still be our responsibility to just kind of look, because there's somebody who has the full support of the community in that position. Yeah, you know, there wouldn't be controversy surrounding it, it would just be a mechanism of keeping talent that we've invested in within our community. Because that's the other component of it too, is the continuing education, our expenses that Bethel pays for. And we do leave ourselves vulnerable if, you know, any of the local communities who have more affluence than us, you know, decided to make theirs a higher position and steal our talent.
Yep.
All right. Any other comments, concerns, discussions from the committee members?
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I know that public input is over, but I'm going to invoke my ex officio status to ask a question.
Sure.
I'm not clear on what were you carrying forward items for further discussion?
Yeah, yes, yeah, I wasn't gonna take motions and move on it, but just to kind of clear up the direction.
Okay, so you weren't taking votes on them, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everything you talked about is still open for discussion?
It is, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, until we go to the public hearing.
Yeah, okay.
The next public hearing. Yes.
Thank you.
Nick, I have a question too. At the Board of Selectmen meeting last night, the Energy Commission came before us. They are currently at ad hoc commission. You might want to look at that, put them into the charter like any other commission.
Okay.
The Energy Commission has done a lot of work, saved the town a lot of money, and I could see them being around for a lot longer. So, you know, it started off as a ad hoc commission and should probably be a full.
Appointed.
Good pointed. And do we have, is there roles and responsibilities of them outlined for that, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the ad hoc.
I
On the
can
website?
send you the the resolution that we passed, oh gosh, years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was like 2010. I'll look it up and I'll send it to you, because it's got the charge and the
Okay.
commission, et cetera.
Would those need updating in addition, if we were to pursue that?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some 70 terms in there, you know?
Yeah.
Bill Craddy's the chairman of it.
Yep, yep. Excellent. Okay, any other comments from the commissioners? Hearing none.
Are you guys looking for a motion to pay the legal fees?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry, Nick.
Number 9, Nick, I was on your guy right here.
Did Nick tell you
There was
to
no
do that?
promotion.
John works, well, I had you dead
No, you thought it was you were gonna get the
I'm
pay.
sitting down here writing that it was approved.
Yeah.
I move that we pay legal
Sorry.
fees.
Second.
What are the legal fees?
Second.
2 million.
Wow.
What, yeah, what's, do we have a total on that?
It's on the last page. I
One
It's
think.
on the last page, it's
$1,115.23.
Okay. Oh, great, there we go.
You had a first and a second.
Yep. So all in favor of paying our legal fees for attorney Biddy services, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Now that we've paid Nick, I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you guys.
It's a long